Okay, so welcome to the Be the Change Project, the joy of inclusion. And so we are the Be the Change Project team here, presented by the Occupational Therapy and Physiotherapy Services. My name is Katie, and this is my partner, Suzanne. And this is the third year that Suzanne and I have been leading this project, this board-wide initiative together, and it's been a joy. So, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is situated upon traditional territories. These territories include the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Métis Nation. I would also like to recognize the enduring presence of Aboriginal peoples on this land. So this presentation was intended strictly for this group, so please do not repeat it without our permission. So thank you, parents and guests, for your interest in the Be the Change project. This is the third year that the Occupational Therapy and Physiotherapy Services have run this project. On the first year, 3 schools joined as the pilot project. Last year, 24 schools participated, and this year registration is open currently, and we will see how many schools apply. We specifically targeted neurotypical students who were in schools with neurodiverse learners with disabilities, hoping we can teach about disabilities and inclusion. One of the main goals of this project is to explore together many different types of people we have in our society and how we can have more compassion for each other. We challenge ourselves and everyone here to be the change we want to see in the world. So in the 2022-23 school year, we have met virtually as a big group 4 times to learn about diversity, inclusion, and allyship. Then the schools individually came up with their own school-based projects and worked hard on making change in their local settings. On the 4th gathering, the schools shared their projects with each other. They shared how they made space to elevate the voices of TDSB's neurodiverse learners and celebrated their successes. We invited many guest speakers with disabilities to share their lived experience, and it was a great learning moment for us all. So one of the most poignant moments for us was hearing from teachers sharing that so many friendships have developed between students of all abilities. It has been such a joy hearing of all the positive impact the students have made in their local schools. So we'll start by hearing directly from the people that participated. So a teacher from Henry Hudson said, "I love watching our children, our Be the Change, become leaders in our school and work towards our common goal of inclusion. I love seeing our ISB students have friends outside of their classroom." Another teacher from Greenholm said, "Seeing the changes in students becoming welcoming and open to learning alongside students who are different than they are. It was a pleasure to see students learn and advocate how to make spaces and activities inclusive for all students." We are hearing from a student from Dorset Park. "I enjoyed sharing my voice with others to make a better change. I have never got the chance to be a part of a group that wants to make such a big change in how students with disabilities are treated. Another part I enjoyed the most was spending time with the students with disabilities. I've got the chance to paint with them, play with them, talk to them, and just have fun with them. I'm glad that my school is taking student involvement for this project, as I think it's very important to get their opinion." Love that. Some more students. Grade 6 student from Bloordale. "I just love being part of the Be the Change Club. It was a very fun experience, and I hope to continue next year." I hope they do apply this year. Grade 8 student. "I enjoyed hanging out with other students while participating in fun games. It was a crucial part of my middle school experience and overall life to be able to enjoy these various forms of learning and activities with others while also advocating for inclusive environment." And now we will actually hear them speak quickly here.
We learned and how we felt. I learned that you can do and change anything with enough work. I also felt passionate about this project because of the cause.
I've learned so much being a part of the Be the Change group, like about how people with different abilities have worked so hard to prove that they can be treated the same and can do anything they put their minds to, just like neurotypical people.
I've learned that people with disabilities aren't too different from us. They're still human beings and deserve to be treated equally. I feel that us humans should do a better job to help the disabled community, and some acts like the curb cut helps neurotypical people too. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you for listening to our presentation.
That was presented at the showcase, and it was just such a joy to hear of all the students' learnings.
You learned and
So Suzanne and myself will briefly review some of the concepts we discussed with the students throughout the school year. The learning objective for our first module was to discuss the concepts of diversity and neurodiversity, discover different types of learners, discuss the language that we use, and give tips on how to communicate with people with disabilities. So in the first module, we discussed the idea of human diversity, how we are all different, but also how many of our wants and needs are the same. We shared with students the notion of how human diversity is the idea that we are all unique and different, and not any of one of us are the same, even twins. We used the idea of cookie recipe and how different people are like different ingredients. If we were all the same, the cookie would be gross. We discussed that neurodiversity is the differences in how our brains are wired and how it functions to support thinking and learning. We also emphasize how this concept celebrates neurological variation as known and valued as any other human variation. It means that the brain differences is just that, differences. So conditions like ADHD and autism aren't abnormal, they're simply variations of the human brain. Okay, so let's hear what some of our students learned as they met neurodiverse peers.
Why we did Be the Change Project. Be the Change Project is meant to make our schools more inclusive by bringing kids together so no one feels left out and everyone feels they belong. We learned what it means to be neurodivergent and brought awareness to the rest of the school.
Next slide, please.
What is neurodivergency? Neurodivergency describes people whose brains differences affect how their brain works. That means they have different strengths and challenges from people whose brains don't have those differences. The possible differences include medical disorders, learning disabilities, and other conditions. Some forms of neurodivergency are autism, ADHD, Down syndrome, and dyslexia, or some forms of neurodiversity. Each is unique and different.
Next slide, please.
We started the River Bear Pals Club to get to know the DK students better and make them feel more included in the school and teach the rest of the school what is neurodivergency and the differences, characteristics of neurodivergency. At River Bear Pals Club, grade 5 students played and learned with DK students in the gym. We led physical activities with them and we observed them and how they interacted and communicated with us. We learned a lot about them.
Next slide, please.
One student I worked with had autism, and I learned that no two students are the same. He had no words and communicated by grabbing my hand and bringing me to what he wanted. He didn't like to play. He would usually just sleep on my lap, or he would walk with me and he would touch his hair. I was confused why. But when I touched his hair, I realized he was telling me to do it because he liked the feel of different stuff. For example, stress balls or a pool noodle or sand.
So you can see here, a lot of deep learning from the time we spent together for just actually spending time talking about disabilities, but especially spending time together. Lots of deep learning there. So neurodiversity values differences instead of seeing them as deficits. Neurodiversity is viewed as part of the variety of people, but it doesn't mean that the word diagnosis or disability are bad words or concepts. Being diagnosed with a disability gives people protection under the law. It allows students to have special education or supports at school. Celebrating differences is important, but it isn't enough to support students with learning and thinking differences at school. It's important to acknowledge disabilities in order for students to be set up for success for supports and services. So we spent a lot of time during the first module getting to know various students using the theme of a day in the life of. We specifically highlighted students with autism, learning disorders, physical disabilities, seizure disorder, blind, low vision, deaf and hard of hearing. This past year, we were pleased to have students from the ASD classroom teach others about themselves. They shared about their strengths and needs and how we can all be friends. For each student, we highlighted the importance of soliciting friendships with them, since we may be surprised about what they can teach us. We shared our own strengths and weaknesses and told each other that you may be surprised too, and being open to a friendship with us. And here's a clip of a student finding so much joy in playing and learning together.
I would say that DK kids are special in their own way. They are really fun to play with, and I had a great time. And I think others had a great time too. One of the kids I worked with a DK student, he liked to play basketball or he would play on the bike. He would help his classmates open their food or open their juice. And when I didn't understand him, his friends were he would point to what he wanted to do. Sometimes when his friends were not in the mood, he would try and calm them down. I would say this was the best experience I've ever had. He was a very sweet and kind to everybody.
Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Lena. When I was with the DK kids in the gym, I worked with a student that was really energetic and loved to play with others. Sometimes he would get frustrated at times, and sometimes he might cry. He talked a bit, but he had a pretty small vocabulary. But in all, he is a very nice and smart kid.
Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I worked with a DK student and they used to ride the tricycle but they couldn't pedal. I was able to get their feet on the pedals and push the bike. I got them riding it in a few minutes. The teacher said that they couldn't ride it before.
Only a peer could do that for sure. We discussed how the language we use matters, that people with disabilities generally prefer person-first language. Person-first language emphasizes the person, not the disability. By placing the person first, the disability is no longer a person's primary defining characteristic. We encourage students to employ the most respectful approach, which is to simply ask the person you're interacting with how they would like to be addressed. We also discussed emphasizing in words, the words we use, the need for accessibility, and emphasizing abilities, encouraging students to focus on others' strengths. Then finally, we spent some time reviewing specific tips on how to interact with people with disabilities. For example, ask first before touching someone's wheelchair. Don't assume that the person with a disability requires support, but if they do, offer it. So our future is bright. These are some of the responses we received at the end of the last year's project and how the students want to continue their inclusive work. So a grade 5 student at FH Miller said, to talk to people with disabilities more, to get a better understanding about what their life is like. Another student at Maple Leaf said, when I grow up, I would love to create prosthetics. I think that I would help people to understand neurodiverse people better and even try and make many more places accessible. A grade 8 student at Bloordale said, I would love to hear multiple stories from others, sharing their own personal struggles, strengths, and achievements alike, while also participate in any form of activities. I plan on continuing my learning by possibly making these stories more vast by sharing them through different forms of poetic, sensory, and visual media. While doing this, I think I can learn a lot and also teach others, and more importantly, while hearing the true voices of others. So that was module 1. So module 2, entitled Equity Inclusion, the objectives were to teach about the terms equity inclusion and what do they mean? What does inclusion look like? How can we incorporate equity into our schools? Secondly, implicit bias. The students learned about implicit bias. We also challenge students on their biases and to self-reflect on these. Thirdly, we learned about culture and what being culturally responsive looks like in our school community and classroom. We also learned about differences between the social and medical model of disability. And finally, universal design of learning and how to apply that to everyday life. So it's definitely a packed module and lots of good discussion. Let's hear how students share their learning on this topic first.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Joshane.
And I'm Persephone.
We are the Be the Change Squad 2.0. Next slide. In talking with other students in the school, we realized that not everyone knew we had DK classes, let alone what happened in those rooms and what the students could do. Our goal was to change that. Next slide.
With our goal being seeing it and acknowledging, we decided to break it down into 3 parts: neurodiversity announcements, character education assemblies, and diagnostic kindergarten activity days. Next slide.
Our first activity to work towards our theme was creating and reading neurodiversity announcements. Our action plan. We wanted to spread awareness about different learning styles and neurodiversity to our school. We have many different ways of learning in our school, and we wanted to teach our school about it. During our virtual announcements, we led a whole week of learning around disabling language, biases, being culturally responsive, universal design for learning, and the social model of disability. These announcements were well received by our school and led to more conversations with our junior intermediate classes around inclusion. Here we start talking about different strategies and next steps. Here, me and Persephone are reading the neurodiversity announcements.
For our second activity, leading toward our goal, we work towards including the DK students in the character education assemblies. We noticed that the DK students were not a part of character education assemblies, and so to include them, we came up with an action plan to present to the student council. And after a few days during which we commenced our other initiatives, they accepted the proposal and we were able to facilitate having the DK students present for the awards. Here you can see 2 of our DK students, Nuzair and Weni. They're holding up their awards nice and proud.
Beautiful. And you can also see that they're spending time working on other curriculum goals, like, public speaking, creating something to, all the words that they are going to say, that could be part of their literacy. So it's not just a separate project, but they were sort of integrating into their curriculum goals. Oops. So we focus on the middle 2 pictures in this visual. The second picture, equality, is everyone getting the same thing, but it doesn't always result in each person succeeding. The third picture, equity, is giving each person what they need to be successful. And this is often the best way to dismantle the barriers and liberate students to access their communities and be the change we're working towards. We learned how inclusion is an intentional act of welcoming diversity and creating an environment where all different students can be respected and accepted. Therefore, diversity is what you have, it is a fact. Inclusion is what you do, it is an action. Simply having neurodiverse classrooms are not enough. Everyone has their own sets of abilities, and when we work together, we can strive for equity and inclusion in our communities. When asked if the students have reached their goals, we were really encouraged by this response, the insight on how there's still so much work to be done. So this is a grade 5 student from John G. Deffenbaker. I don't totally remember what my original goal was, but I think it had something to do with me wanting to make everyone feel included, even if they have different abilities than me. However, I'd say that I haven't completely reached my goal because I have a long way to go to make sure no one is excluded. So my answer is a bit yes and no. I love that. Very insightful. Students learned that the medical model of disability is where the person is the focus on what needs to be fixed or resolved. That why life is so hard for them is that the person is what needs to be changed and fit in. Whereas the social model highlights that people are disabled by barriers in society, not by the impairments or differences. Barriers can be physical, like buildings not having accessible toilets or ramps.
Thanks, Katie. So next, the students were challenged to recognize any implicit biases they may have and reflect on those assumptions that they've maybe made about someone before getting to know them. Helping everyone understand their hidden bias is the key to the future. If we want all students to succeed, then we have to understand what students with a disability are dealing with and make sure that we're providing equal opportunities for all. We learned how to be culturally responsive and how to bring culture into our schools and classrooms. Culturally responsive practices involve recognizing and incorporating the assets and strengths of all students that all students bring into the classroom and ensuring all the experiences in the school are relevant to all students. We see students' cultural knowledge as a power to empower our students. Culture, interests, and backgrounds cannot be left out of the school environment. When we know better about cultural backgrounds of students, we can do better to create an inclusive environment in our schools. Finally, in Module 2, the students learned about the concept of universal design of learning. First, we talked about the curb cut effect on the sidewalk. The curb cut effect was originally designed to benefit people who use a wheelchair, but in fact, it ends up benefiting much of us, such as those pushing strollers, people on bicycles, or in rollerblades, just as a few examples. Universal design of learning works in a similar way, recognizing that all students are unique and the way that we all learn can be individualized. Some of us work better reading and working independently, while others excel watching videos or working in a group. The goal of universal design of learning is to understand students' strengths and weaknesses and eliminate or reduce barriers to learning by providing support and accommodation that the diversity of students need to ensure success. The next module was Module 3. The main focus of this module was to introduce the concepts of allyship and activism, but other important concepts such as ableism and intersectionality were discussed. At the end of the module, we also talked about possible projects that each team can plan and experience their action of inclusion. So first, students had the opportunity to learn about ableism. Have you ever talked about what a person can't do because of their disabilities? Students had an opportunity to learn that the focus on what a person can't do is ableism, an inherent bias against people with a disability. So this is a video from a retired Vice Principal, Michael Moore, one of our guest speakers. Michael has muscular dystrophy and uses a power scooter as his primary source of mobility. So let's hear from him.
Not an automatic tragedy. Having a disability does not make you special or exceptional. Disability is actually very common. Now for ableism, ableism refers to bias and discrimination against people living with disabilities. It hinges on the idea that people with disabilities are less valuable, less deserving, less worthy. Some would say even less human than non-disabled people. That, of course, is absolutely not true. Ableism is perhaps the most common form of discrimination every identity can face. This is surprising given the UN says there are 1 billion people in this world living with a disability. Why then, if it's so common, is ableism rarely mentioned? And why is it called the silent ism? I believe that because of disability's connection to the medical model, people do not like to think about illness, disease, and disability. That's why people don't mention it. But that makes absolutely no sense given how common disability is. Everyone needs to think about illness and disability. Not thinking about it will not protect you or someone you love from someday becoming temporarily or permanently disabled. And It just helps to further stigmatize disability if we don't talk about it. If you do become disabled, you will be better off if you have already learned about disability and accepted that it's a common experience for many people. My own acceptance of disability was made easier by the fact I worked in high school and university with mentally challenged adults. Also, I volunteered as a teenager at my local nursing home. I sometimes think I may not have become an educator without that experience helping people with disabilities. I also am not sure I would be speaking about my disability so openly without that early on experience of learning about disability in others when I did not even know I had one. Ableism is common. This slide shows some examples. I think ableist language is the most common form. We all use it, we all do it, but it is still wrong. Even I'm guilty of it and have to catch myself when I say something like, I was walking down the hall. No, I was rolling down the hall.
People with disabilities add a unique perspective to life. They're often very creative and persistent as the world they live in demands this of them. The disability community has a lot to offer and teach us. This is Mayan Siv, one of our keynote speakers from last year's project, a Toronto entrepreneur and photographer. And she said her unique perspective allows her to capture beautiful photographs. Let's listen to what she has to say.
Away from. And throughout my life, I have been on the journey where I've learned that my disability has given me opportunities to look at the world from a different perspective. Not only physically look at the world from a different perspective, sitting on a wheelchair and using a camera to capture my experiences and storytell, but also because of the additional challenges that living in a world that wasn't designed for me, not yet, that wasn't designed for me in mind, I've had to become more creative. I've had to think about other ways of doing things. And over time, that's given me an opportunity to contribute to all different types of activities. And photography is one that really stood out for me. This was my first passion, my first love. Away from and capture the photos of students who were taking time off for the summer and going to camp. So I got an opportunity to see the world through their eyes and their experiences. And that was really cool for me because it also connected my love for photography with my world of disability for the first time. Next slide. And this is just an image from that. And all of a sudden I found myself realizing that I had something special to say because of my disability and not despite it. That because I was sitting in a wheelchair, I could see things from a different vantage point. And in this image, this was an image of two boys from camp who are being wheeled back to kind of the cafeteria area. And I was wheeling behind them. And because I was at a low enough point, I was almost at their viewpoint and I could capture an image that was a lot more personal and intimate than a photographer without a disability. It became a strength in my work. Next slide. And I worked with celebrities, and then all of a sudden I started being known for the fact that I was a photographer with a disability. I became known for someone who had something to say that was different, that was special, that was not like everybody else. And I started to love that. And
The students also had an opportunity to get to know more about the concept of intersectionality, which refers to the way race, Gender, class, and other parts of who we are intersect and overlap with one another. We all come from different backgrounds and experience the world differently. Knowing intersectionality helps students to see that each one of them is complex and many factors contribute to their own identities and experience, and encourages each student to look at the whole picture and all the factors that impact their identity and experience at school. This is a short video explaining examples of ableism.
And ableist language greatly contributes to the stigmatization of disability. Intersectionality refers to the interconnectedness of social and political identities and the influence of them on our experience of discrimination and privilege. We are complex creatures with multiple identities. All of you have multiple identities. We are not just one identity. I am very aware that my experience being disabled is influenced by my being white and being male. Those two identities are facts. They give me privilege even within the disability community, as does my socioeconomic status. And that is privilege that I did nothing to earn. It's because of how I was born. I use that to do good though. I try to use my privilege as leverage to do good in the disabled community. I know that the experience of being female, for example, with disability can be entirely different from mine and less privileged, just as being a different race makes living with a disability frequently more challenging and you are more likely to face discrimination. What does that mean for you in terms of understanding disability? Know your identities and privilege or lack of privilege. If you do not have a disability, you are privileged. Remember, your privilege can be kept in check if you are aware of your biases you have about disability. Your awareness can make you more empathetic to others with disabilities whose other identities make them more likely to face greater challenges and discrimination. And
we also learn together how you can be an ally so that you can help others to stand up what's right for them. We treat others the way you'd want to be treated so that we can all feel respected and safe. To be a good ally, we need to listen so that we learn exactly what we can do and how we can help at the end of the day. We highlighted activists who are disabled to remind students that no matter your age or abilities, you too can make a change in the world. Alice Wong is a research consultant and disability rights activist. In 2015, she attended the reception at the White House via telepresence robot. She was the first person to visit the White House and the president by robot presence. Greta Thunberg is an autistic activist who challenged world leaders to make immediate action on climate change. After spending 3 sessions together, learning, discussing, hearing from the disabled community, we challenged the individual schools to translate their learning into action. For the remaining of the school year, each school's Be the Change team led inclusion projects at their local schools. We will highlight a few right here. We'll let the students speak for themselves, and this is Silverthorne Public School.
Hi, I'm Selena. Our Be the Change group started an inclusion project at Silverthorne with a bakery. We were inspired by the work of students at George Webster. The primary and junior DD classes work with the grade 5-6 students at our school every day. The shop is open for 1 period. Everything is $1 and we sell 5 different products. This is a great way to encourage the functional academic with the students in the ISP program, and a way to get students from throughout the school to interact with students they don't see outside for recess. Recess Buddies is an initiative where some students from the ISP classes will buddy up with members of the BTC group. Members will take their buddies outside for lunch recess throughout the week and encourage them to play with new friends and try new activities. They are equipped with AAC lanyards to encourage communication and safety. It has been a really fun way for students to play with new peers. Reading buddies. Hi, I'm Amir and I'm going to be talking about reading buddies. The grade 5-6 class at our school comes to read, create art, play with the primary and junior ISP classes throughout the week. Everyone is paired with a different student each week.
Okay, so the Rivercrest, students spent a lot of time getting to know each other during gym periods. So they were building relationships at one gym class at a time with the DK students, so it's the diagnostic kindergarten students, with the grade 5 student leaders. And they discover different ways of communicating and the joy of communicating with all students and interacting with each other. They taught their school about neurodiversity through an assembly. And also through their Showcase Neurodiverse Be the Change project as well. This is just a little picture of the things that they did. And some more pictures from their project. Okay, so George Webster had 3 focuses to their project. The grade 8 students, along with the DD students, had a baking club, and together they created baked goods for school, which they sold to the school community, raising money for their school and supporting many of the school programs. Students with all abilities also worked on Sandwich Club to serve their local community. The students not only learned a skill in making a sandwich, but also the community at large benefited. And these sandwiches went to local shelters to assist with that sort of food insecurity. And finally, they spent lots of time together expressing themselves and creating art. So we had 3 high schools join us for the project this year. The high schoolers were very ambitious at Don Mills CI, and they started an in-school food bank. The Be the Change student leaders and the DD class put together a food bank. And they also secured community partners for sustainability. And this is their food bank. Even the activity of stocking shelves and working together in sort of a very amazing school community project. They also supported many of the students who live with food insecurity as well. And along the way, they developed lots of beautiful friendships and learned many new skills together. So the next school was David and Mary Thompson. And they had a course in their physical education for student leadership. And this classroom spent their time learning about disabilities supported by our program and worked one-on-one with the DD students in TDSB sports events. They were also able to join Special Olympics Canada, and Tim Hortons highlighted their work. So we'll listen to a little short video on that.
My name is Spring. I am a Special Olympics athlete. I play basketball and run track. I love my teammates. I feel good to be included.
From February 3rd to the 5th, you can support athletes like my student Spring when you buy the Special Olympics donut at Tim Hortons. 100% of the proceeds will be donated to support our community programs. Choose to include.
My name.
And not only did they do the Special Olympics Canada, but they also appeared on TV. So let's watch a little clip from that.
Welcome back. So what if I told you that this weekend you could eat delicious donuts and help raise money for a great cause at the same time?
Yeah, I think we're all in. It's all part of Tim Hortons' #ChooseToInclude campaign. It's all in support of Special Olympics Canada, an organization dedicated to enriching the lives of thousands of Canadian children, youth, and adults who are living with an intellectual disability. So here to tell us more, Special Olympics athlete and her teacher and coach, Jennifer Kill. Welcome both of you. Spring and Jennifer.
Okay, Spring, you have been a Special Olympics athlete for more than 6 years. Tell us about how you got involved.
I love teammates.
Yeah.
I play sports.
Yeah.
Basketball, swimming, badminton, basketball.
All the sports.
Wow. Spring, do you mind if I just move your hair away from your microphone? Is that okay?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So you mentioned basketball. Why is basketball, why do you like it so much?
We love it.
Mm-hmm. And you play with your friends?
Play with teammates.
And your teammates, yeah.
Yeah. I love to win.
Oh, you love to win. Okay.
So,
welcome back. So what if I told you?
Okay. So we're humbled to be part of all these amazing school initiatives. It was such a pleasure to share this with all of you. And in the chat, we have our occupational therapy, physiotherapy website. I'll put it in again because I put it in at the beginning. Sorry. And please, we're happy to answer some questions if you have any. I'm just putting our website in there. And we have a separate tab for the Be the Change project as well. You can also use the chat if you have any questions.
Thank you for your enthusiasm and joining us. And if there's no questions, I think we might close this session and enjoy the rest of the conference. Looks like there's lots of great sessions out there.